If you're new to cycling or just in need of a bit of a refresher, this video is for you. Correctly inflating your tyres is key to safe, efficient and comfortable riding. And it may seem like a simple thing, but trust me, I've seen many experienced cyclists mess it up and get it wrong. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to do that. And I'm also going to show you a few little things such as valve cores and how you can avoid them messing it up for you as well. First up, you'll need a pump. Now, a mini pump such as this is really useful for carrying about and putting in your jersey pockets and taking with you on a ride. But, you don't want to be relying on this day in, day out. They take a long time to pump up a tyre all the way and they don't have a gauge on. So I'd highly recommend that you invest in a dedicated floor pump or track pump such as this with a gauge on it. And the idea is this just lives at home and then you can check your tyre pressures before you go out on a ride. Also, they make short work of pumping up a tyre, usually about 8 or 10 pumps and you're there. You need to figure out what kind of valve you've got on your tyres. Now, most likely it's going to be one of these, which is a Pressure valve. It's easily identified, it's long and thin, it's got a little knurled tip that you undo in order to inflate it and then tighten it back once it's been inflated to keep the air in. Now, if you're riding an older bike, for example, an old town bike, then it might have a Schrader valve on the tyres, but these are less common now. If you're not sure what that is, it's also the kind of valve that's used on car tyres. Many pumps will have a connection for either a Schrader or a Pressure valve. If you're not sure which yours is, then it's sometimes written on the pump. If it's not written on the pump, then you can usually tell because the Pressure valve will require the thinner, deeper hole for the pump to fit onto the valve, whereas a Schrader is wider and shallower. In most cases, the valve is attached to an inner tube which inflates from inside the tyre. But increasingly we're seeing tubeless tyres on bikes, and this is a tubeless tyre I've got on my bike. The valve is actually just attached onto the inside of the wheel and there is no inner tube. The air just inflates on the inside of the tyre. Another important detail that's worth knowing if you're a beginner is you may notice I'm using these rather fancy aero deep section wheels, and an important thing here is that most valves on most inner tubes won't actually extend all the way through the deep section and out the other side, so you wouldn't be able to pump it up. In that instance, you often need either a special long valve inner tube or a valve extender that you can then screw into your inner tube valve to make it longer so that it does come all the way through like mine do here. What pressure should you inflate your tyres to? Well, this depends on a number of different things, such as the width of the tyre that you're using, the width of the rim, the rider weight, the surface that you're intending to ride on, as well as things like the weather conditions. If it's wet, you might want slightly lower pressure. So for example, the bike that you can see behind me, I've got 26mm tyres on that. They're set up tubeless, and as a result, I'm running them at about 85 PSI, but I'll drop that by 5 PSI if the conditions are wet. Now, a good starting point is to just look at what's recommended on the tyres that you've got themselves. It's usually written somewhere on the side, the recommended pressures, and you can go from there. Alternatively, certain tyre brands, such as Pirelli, actually have a useful chart that's available online, or it's available on the inside of the box as well, that gives you a whole range of factors that you're able to factor in to determine what is the best pressure for you. At the other end of the spectrum, on my gravel bike, that has 43mm tyres on it. I typically run those at about 30 PSI. But if you're unsure of what pressure to use, then I'd recommend asking your riding mates what they use if they're more experienced than you. Or alternatively, you could ask the question on the GCN community page on Facebook. There's lots of friendly advice on there from the other community members. If you're using a Pressure valve, as mentioned before, you'll want to make sure that the little knurled pip on the end is fully undone in order for you to inflate the tyre like so. Next, you want to take your pump, and if it has a head on a track pump like this, it's really important to put it on straight. Don't put it on skew-if or wonky, as that can actually bend the valve or damage it, or in some cases snap it. The same goes for for when you remove it. Now, most track head pump nozzles simply go on like so. You may need to use a bit of pressure by pushing on the actual tyre and the pump head itself. And then there's usually a locking mechanism by way of a lever, such as on this one. Pulling this lever locks the track pump head onto the valve. After you've done that, you can then pump up the tyre. Some pump designs don't lock on to the valve in the same way, they thread on, such as this one. And this is a feature that's found more commonly on hand pumps, the kind of pump that you would take with you on a ride. The same steps apply. Simply undo the little pip on the valve and then you can thread it on by turning it clockwise. It only needs to be finger tight, don't over tighten it. If you're using a pump that threads on to the valve, as you unthread it and unwind it to remove it, be very careful not to also unthread and unscrew the valve core. If you accidentally pull it off and take the valve core with it, you'll hear a big gush as all the air runs out. This is really, really annoying. But if you're careful, you should be able to avoid it. And if this happens, it's not the end of the world. You can simply put the valve core back in and tighten it up, either with a pair of pliers or with a dedicated valve key tool, such as this Park Tool one, but also many multi-tools these days come with a little valve key built into them somewhere. Valve cores are not always removable on every inner tube, but many inner tubes do have removable valve cores, and tubeless tyre valves also have removable valve cores. So I'm going to remove this valve core so you can see what happens when the valve core pops out. Yeah. If you're using a track pump to remove it, you simply return the lever to the open position and then pull the nozzle off. Don't worry if there's a slight hiss of air, that's pretty normal. Just be careful whenever you attach or detach a pump, just not to try and bend the valve, and then after you've removed the pump, always ensure that you do up the little pit at the end to close the valve so that air doesn't leak out as you're riding along. A really common mistake that beginner cyclists make is not putting enough air in their tyres, and then they get punctures all the time. And this is because they're getting pinch flats. A pinch flat is when, because there's not sufficient air in the tyre can deform too much when it hits objects on the road. And so you hit an object, the tyre deforms and it compresses the inner tube against the wheel rim. This causes a signature kind of snake bite of both edges of the wheel rim cut into the inner tube and give you a puncture. So that's it, how to inflate your bike tyres. I hope you found this video useful, and if you have, then please give it a thumbs up and let us know in the comments if you've got any questions, and also what are the maintenance videos you'd like to see in the future. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.